friend of mine gave me these stair rail caps that are left over from a new construction project. These are made of alder and were about 16-foot sections when I first got them, and I cut them down to just over 6 feet. I want the final desk size to be about 72 inches by 30 inches. I'm a little short on the full length material to get the 30-inch width, so I decided to take some of the cutoffs and join them end to end to make up the difference. I'm really not a big fan of ingrained joints, but all these stair rail long pieces are glued up anyway, and a lot of ingrained joints. And the final desk will look a little bit like a butcher block, so these extra joints will fit right in. I tend to use this doweling jig on a lot of projects. It's pretty trustworthy, I guess. Just the marks are a little hard to see with my old man eyes. The dowels are mostly just to give it enough strength to hold the joint together until I can get the full desk glue up done. I'm trusting that my workbench is pretty flat and using it as a call to make sure the glue up is true. And I actually did get a straight edge to double check, but just didn't get it captured on camera. And a good look down the length doesn't hurt to double check. I'm going to clean up the edges on the table saw, essentially using my table saw as a joiner. It's worth it to double check the exact setting on the saw, since even a tenth of a degree off will compound over so many joints and cause a real issue. These are pretty long pieces, and I want a clean and consistent cut. So, to avoid my unsteady hands creating a jiggle, I'm using a feather board just in front of the blade. Making a nice clean cut on both sides of every piece takes a while. Now it's time for the glue up. I'm doing this directly flat on my workbench. To keep it from getting glued down to my workbench, I put down a piece of thick paper, almost like cardboard. I think it's called X board or Ram board. With such a large glue up, even a small twist could result in a big issue over the whole length. So I clamp it down to my workbench while the glue dries. And yes, I do have confidence that my workbench is completely flat in all directions. I recruited some help from my daughter to get the router sled set up. We put a full sheet of plywood on top of my workbench, and this gives me a nice flat surface that I can screw down the rails for the sled, and a couple of screws to hold the workpiece in place. I did a whole video on the design and build of this router sled if you're interested. I'll put a link in the description. That video has the parts list and a step by step on how to build this DIY sled. This thing has been a really great addition to my small wood shop. It allows me to easily do much larger projects like this. There are a lot of questions from that video about how long of a workpiece can be done with the router sled, which largely depends on how long of rails that you buy. Although here's a good example of a workpiece that's slightly longer than my rails, and I just slide the workpiece down a little bit to do the last section. I suppose in theory you could do an unlimited length of piece just sliding it down, kind of like the way a traditional thickness planer works. After a lot of passes and a lot of patience with the screaming router in my face, this thing is completely flat in all directions and both sides are completely parallel to each other. So now I can break down the router sled and get my workbench back. After I square up the ends using a circular saw and straight edge, then I put a 15-degree bevel on the bottom side. I tried to get the bevel exactly where the glue up joint is, just wanted to try to hide that joint on the ends of the desk. So here's where I made the big mistake on this project. There seems to be at least one on every project. I thought that a horizontal stretcher would be good to stabilize it from warping over time. And the right way to do that would have been to use a steel C channel. But I was kind of in the mode of just wanting to do the build of this project 100% with the recycled wood that I got for free and not buy anything. So I took a cut off of the stair rail, resawed a half-inch slice on my bandsaw, cleaned it up on the planer, and then cut it square on the table saw. And after meticulously squaring up the inset, then I glued it in place with the help of some brad nails. So this looks kind of cool, but it's a really bad idea as I discovered a bit later in the build. I'll show the problem it caused and how I fixed it coming up here in just a minute. So another question I had from my previous router sled video is about these router marks. They look much worse on camera than they are. They're really just because of the circular rotation of the router bit hits the grain in different directions, and they're really very shallow marks. You can see here they sand out in just minutes. Here I'm just putting an 1/8 inch round over around the top edge. Before staining it, I apply a pre-stain conditioner to try to reduce the blotchiness. Alder is one of those woods that's extremely difficult to get a good blotch-free stain. And with the combination of the pre-stain conditioner as well as using a gel stain, I'm hoping to avoid too much blotchiness. So about the time I finish applying the stain to the bottom side is when it hits me that using these wood stretchers was a big mistake. I noticed that there's a bow in the desk that wasn't there before, and it's being caused by these stretchers expanding with the change in temperature. So it's pretty obvious to me now that this was a dumb mistake. Hindsight, I guess. So I go to Home Depot and get some low budget pieces of steel C channel and drill some holes in them. I know that you can get some nice powder coated C channel online, like these ones that I used in a previous project. But with a can of black spray paint, these don't look too bad, and they're on the underside of the desk anyway. I decided there really isn't a good way to get the wood stretchers out, so I decided to just cut them at every joint. And as soon as I do this, the workpiece returns back to completely flat, and I can get back to finishing it. I'm using lacquer as a clear coat that I just spray on. I'm sanding it with 320 grit sandpaper in between coats. This thing is starting to look really nice. I bought these adjustable legs online. There's a lot of choices of these available. I'm not sure which brand is better than the other, but I'm really happy with these. I'll leave a link in the description for the specific ones that I used. The C channel gets screwed on just on the outside of the legs, which allows me to avoid cutting another inset for these, like I wasted my time doing with the wood stretchers earlier. The finished desk looks great, and I'm stoked. Thanks so much for watching.